I still hear her words echoing through the empty hallways of this house. You only care about money, Mom. That's all you've ever cared about. The day my daughter Jessica slammed the door in my face was the same day I discovered I had 6 months to live. 6 months to set things right. 6 months to show her what truly mattered. But she never gave me the chance to explain why her name was first in my will, why everything I had ever done was for her. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctor's voice faded into white noise as I sat there, clutching my purse, nodding as if I understood what terminal really meant. All I could think about was Jessica, my beautiful, headstrong daughter who hadn't spoken to me in 3 years. 3 years of birthdays, holidays, and ordinary Tuesdays, lost to a misunderstanding that had spiraled into something monstrous. I left the hospital and drove straight to her apartment in downtown Boston. The city skyline glittered against the setting sun, mocking the darkness that was settling into my bones. I hadn't called ahead. Perhaps that was my first mistake. When she opened the door, her face transformed from surprise to ice in seconds. "Mom? What are you doing here?" Her voice was flat, devoid of any warmth. I stood there, my rehearsed speech evaporating. "Jessie, I need to talk to you. It's important." She crossed her arms, blocking the entrance. Behind her, I could see evidence of a life I knew nothing about. Framed photos of friends I'd never met, books I hadn't known she enjoyed, a half-empty wine glass beside a laptop. A stranger's life. "I'm busy right now. Maybe another time. Please." My voice cracked. "It won't take long." She sighed. That familiar sigh that always made me feel like an inconvenience. She stepped aside, allowing me entry into her world. The apartment was small but tastefully decorated. Jessica had always had an eye for beauty, something she certainly hadn't inherited from me. I perched on the edge of her sofa, clutching my purse like a shield. "I've been to see Dr. Michaels today," I began. "Is this about money again?" She interrupted. "Because if you're here to talk about the house or Dad's insurance, I'm dying, Jessica." The words hung in the air between us, sharp and terrible. She stared at me, her expression unchanged. Did she think I was lying, making it up for attention? The seconds stretched into an unbearable silence. "Cancer," I clarified. "Pancreatic. 6 months, maybe less." Something flickered in her eyes. Not sadness or concern, but suspicion. "And you came straight here? Why?" "Because you're my daughter. Because you want to make sure I know about the will?" She cut in, her voice rising. "To remind me not to contest anything when the time comes? Or is this some new manipulation tactic?" I felt as if she'd slapped me. "Jessica, no. I came because I love you. Because we don't have much time. You only care about money, Mom. That's all you've ever cared about." Her words were precise, calculated to cut. Not me, not Dad, just the house, the accounts, the precious family heirlooms. I stood up, suddenly unable to breathe in the suffocating smallness of her apartment. "You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I've understood since I was 16 and overheard you arguing with Dad about my college fund. It's a waste to spend it all on her education, you said." I was standing right outside the door. That conversation. How could she have heard only those words, and not what came after? Not the context, not the reason. But there was no reaching her now. The wall between us had grown too high. "The will says your name first," I said quietly. "It's always had your name first." She laughed, a harsh sound that seemed to scrape the air. "Of course it does. What good is money if you can't control people from beyond the grave?" I left her apartment with leaden feet, the folder of medical information still clutched in my hand. I had wanted to explain everything, the truth about her father, about our financial struggles, about why I had worked so hard for so long. I wanted her to know that every dollar saved wasn't from greed, but from fear, bone-deep fear that had shaped my entire life. As I drove back to my empty house in the suburbs, rain began to fall, mirroring the tears that streamed down my face. 6 months, and my only child believed I was nothing but a money-hungry old woman who had never loved her. Little did she know that the truth was far more complicated, and the will she so casually dismissed contained secrets that would change everything she thought she knew about me, about her father, and about the life she had walked away from 3 years ago. My name is Eleanor Walsh. I'm 62 years old, and I've spent my entire life in Millfield, Massachusetts, a town small enough to know everyone's business, but large enough to hide secrets if you're careful. I was born here, raised my daughter here, and now it seems I'll die here too. My day starts at 5:30 a.m., same as it has for 40 years. Old habits from when Jessica was small and I had to get her ready for school before my shift at the diner. Now, with the house empty, I still wake before dawn, make coffee in the same chipped mug, and watch the sun rise over Mrs. Peabody's oak tree next door. People in town call me Practical Eleanor. Some say it with respect, others with a hint of pity. The woman who never spends an extra penny, who darns her own socks, who still clips coupons despite owning the diner outright now. They don't understand that being practical wasn't a choice. It was survival. After Frank died, that's Jessica's father, I became both mother and father to our 10-year-old daughter. The insurance money wasn't much, barely enough to keep the mortgage paid for a year. Everyone expected me to sell the house, to downsize, to accept help. Instead, I took over the morning shift at Millfield Diner, then picked up evening bookkeeping work for local businesses. I slept 4 hours a night for years. Jessica never went without. That was my one promise to myself and to Frank's memory. She had dance lessons when she wanted them, a beautiful prom dress, braces for her teeth. When her friends went to summer camp, she went too. I ate beans on toast for dinner those months, but she never knew. The diner became mine 15 years ago when old Mr. Peterson decided to retire. By then, I had saved enough for a down payment, and the bank trusted me because I had kept Peterson's books immaculate for years. Buying that diner was the proudest day of my life, except for the day Jessica graduated from college. My home is modest but paid for. 2 bedrooms, a small garden where I grow tomatoes and zucchini in summer, a porch swing that Frank built the year before he died. I've never replaced the floral wallpaper in the kitchen, though it's faded now. Jessica always hated it, said it was outdated. She's right, of course, but some things you keep because they hold memories, not because they're beautiful. Every Sunday I visit Frank at Millfield Cemetery. I bring fresh flowers, nothing extravagant, just whatever is blooming in the garden or on sale at the grocery store. I tell him about the week, about the diner, about the town gossip. I used to tell him about Jessica too, her grades, her friends, her dreams. Now those conversations are painfully short. She's still not speaking to me, Frank. I don't know how to fix it. The cancer doesn't surprise me somehow. My body has been sending warnings for months. The fatigue that coffee couldn't cure, the pain that made me wince when I lifted heavy trays, the weight dropping off without trying. I ignored it all because the diner needed me, because I couldn't afford to be sick, because acknowledging weakness has never been my way. Dr. Michaels, James, I've known him since he was a boy coming into the diner for chocolate milkshakes, tried to talk to me about treatments. Chemotherapy might buy me time, he said. Might extend those 6 months to a year, but his eyes told the truth his words couldn't. It would be time purchased at the cost of whatever quality of life I have left. Is there someone who can help you, Eleanor? He asked, knowing the answer already. I just smiled and shook my head. My sister Margie lives in Arizona with her 3rd husband. We talk on birthdays and Christmas, exchange cards, but we're not close. Not anymore. There are regulars at the diner who would probably help. Tom, who comes in every morning for scrambled eggs and wheat toast. Sarah, who runs the florist shop across the street. But they're customers, not caregivers. And then there's Jessica, my only child, who believes I value bank statements more than I ever valued her. I keep her baby book in my nightstand drawer. It's worn now, the cover faded, but inside are all the milestones. First smile, first step, first day of school, her handprint in blue paint, a lock of hair from her first haircut, birthday card she made me, with wobbly letters declaring me the best mom ever. When did that little girl who adored me become the woman who couldn't stand to be in the same room with me? The will she mentioned so dismissively sits in my lawyer's office downtown. Thomas Blackwell has handled my affairs for 30 years. He's the only person besides me who knows exactly what that document contains, and why Jessica's name is indeed listed first. Not because I'm trying to control her from the grave, but because I'm trying, one last time, to protect her. Tonight, I'll close the diner early. I'll tell Rita, my longtime waitress, that I have a migraine. I'll drive home in my 15-year-old Honda, make myself a cup of tea, and sit on Frank's porch swing. I'll watch the fireflies emerge in the garden as darkness falls, and I'll try to figure out how to make my daughter understand the truth before it's too late for both of us, because the secret I've kept for 30 years is the reason for everything Jessica misunderstands about me. And that secret is finally going to come out. The call came 3 days after my visit to Jessica's apartment. I was at the diner, refilling coffee for the morning regulars, when my cell phone vibrated in my pocket. Unknown number. I normally wouldn't answer during the breakfast rush, but something, intuition perhaps, made me step into the back office. Mrs. Walsh? A woman's voice, professional, unfamiliar. This is Patricia Miller. I'm a nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital. Your daughter Jessica has been admitted. The coffee pot slipped from my hand, crashing to the floor. Hot coffee splashed my ankles, but I barely felt it. What happened? Is she all right? My voice didn't sound like my own. She's stable, but she's asking for you. That's all I can say over the phone. I left Rita in charge, not bothering to clean up the broken glass. The drive to Boston was a blur. Traffic lights, highway exits, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. All I could think was, not Jessica, not my daughter, not when we'd left things so broken. The hospital corridors seemed endless. When I finally found her room, I paused outside the door, trying to compose myself. Through the small window, I could see her, pale against the white sheets, an IV in her arm, her eyes closed. My heart clenched. I pushed the door open gently. Jessica? Her eyes fluttered open, focusing on me with difficulty. Mom, she whispered, and for a moment, she sounded like my little girl again, the one who called for me after nightmares, who needed me to check under the bed for monsters. I rushed to her side, taking her hand. What happened? Are you hurt? Appendicitis, she said weakly. Emergency surgery last night. Relief washed over me. Appendicitis was serious, but treatable. Not life-threatening if caught in time. Why didn't you call me sooner? Wasn't exactly planned. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. They found my emergency contact card in my wallet. I sat beside her bed, stroking her hand as I had done when she was small. For a few precious minutes, the wall between us seemed to thin. She was vulnerable, and I was her mother, the most basic, primal relationship, stripped of complications. Do you need anything? Water? Another blanket? She shook her head. Just stay for a while. I stayed. All day. I called the diner and arranged coverage for the week. I spoke with her doctors, made notes about her medication schedule, asked about aftercare. When she slept, I watched her face, searching for traces of the little girl she had been. When she was awake, we talked. Careful conversations about nothing important. The weather, hospital food, the plot of a TV show she'd been watching. It wasn't until evening, when the nurse brought her dinner tray, that Jessica finally asked, "How are you feeling?" With the, I'm okay. I lied. The truth was, I'd been ignoring my own symptoms. The increasing pain, the fatigue that dragged at me. Don't worry about me. Have you started treatment? I hesitated. I've decided against chemotherapy. Her eyes widened. What? Why? Quality over quantity, I said simply. I'd rather have a few good months than a year of being sick from treatment. She was quiet for a long moment. What about the diner? I'm putting it up for sale next week. Another silence. And the house? Something in her tone made me look up sharply. There it was again, that focus on the material things, the assets, as if that was all that mattered about my impending death. I haven't decided, I said carefully. She nodded, her expression unreadable. You should get some rest. You look tired. I'm feeling much better. The nurse said I might go home tomorrow. I can take you to my house, I offered quickly. Look after you for a few days. No need, she said, reaching for her phone. I already called Andrew. He's picking me up. Andrew? I echoed. My boyfriend, she said, not meeting my eyes. We lived together. I thought you knew. I didn't know. I knew nothing about this man who shared my daughter's life. Her home. Another reminder of how completely I'd been shut out. I'd like to meet him, I said carefully. Maybe someday. She was typing on her phone, dismissing me without words. I stood, gathering my purse. I'll come back in the morning, before you're discharged. Don't bother, she said, still not looking up. It's a long drive for you, and I'll be fine with Andrew. I stood there, uncertain. Had I misread the situation? Had those few hours of reconnection been nothing more than the gratitude of a patient for any visitor? Jessie, I began. I thought maybe this was a chance for us to... To what, Mom? She finally looked up, her eyes suddenly hard. To pretend everything's fine between us? It's not. One hospital visit doesn't change that. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I just want to help you. I don't need your help. I don't need anything from you. She paused, then added with deliberate cruelty, especially not your money, so don't worry about the will. I left without another word, my vision blurred with tears I refused to shed in front of her. In the hospital parking lot, I sat in my car and finally let the sobs come. How had we come to this? How had my child become so cold, so convinced of my selfishness? The next morning, despite her dismissal, I returned to the hospital with a small overnight bag containing comfortable clothes for her to wear home. The nurse at the station looked at me strangely when I gave Jessica's name. Mrs. Walsh, your daughter was discharged 2 hours ago. Her husband came for her. Husband? I repeated numbly. The nurse checked her computer. Yes, Andrew Reynolds. He's listed as her spouse in our records. My daughter was married, and I hadn't known, hadn't been invited, hadn't even been told. As I walked back to my car, clutching the bag of unnecessary clothes, a text message arrived on my phone. Thanks for coming yesterday. I'm home now. Please respect my privacy and give me some space. Space. As if the 3,000 days since our last real conversation wasn't space enough. As if the gulf between us could be measured in mere physical distance. I drove back to Millfield in silence. No radio, no tears now, just a hollow ache where my heart should be. When I arrived home, I went straight to my bedroom and opened the locked bottom drawer of my dresser. Inside was a manila envelope containing documents I had hoped never to share with Jessica, evidence of the secrets I'd kept, the choices I'd made, the reasons behind everything she misunderstood. I had thought we had time, 6 months, to find our way back to each other. But her marriage to a man whose name I'd never even heard until today made it clear. I was running out of time faster than I had imagined, and the betrayals, it seemed, were just beginning. The photograph sits on my bedside table. Jessica at 5 years old, gap-toothed smile, pigtails askew, sitting on Frank's shoulders at the county fair. His face is tilted up toward her, pure adoration in his eyes. It was taken 2 months before the accident that took him from us. Frank Walsh was a good man, a carpenter with gifted hands. He could coax beauty from the most ordinary piece of wood. Our kitchen table, the porch swing, Jessica's childhood rocking horse, all bore the marks of his craftsmanship. He wasn't wealthy, didn't have a college degree, but he was honest, hardworking, and he loved us fiercely. The night he died, it was raining, one of those sudden summer storms that turn roads into rivers. He was driving home from a job in the next county. The police said he swerved to avoid a deer, hit a slick patch, and went off the road into a ravine. By the time they found him, it was too late. I remember standing in our kitchen when the officers came to the door, Jessica coloring at the table, oblivious to how our world was about to shatter. Mrs. Walsh, they said, removing their hats. We're very sorry. That night, after I finally got Jessica to sleep, I sat at our kitchen table and faced the truth. I was alone with a 10-year-old daughter, a mortgage, and less than $3,000 in our checking account. Frank didn't have life insurance. We had been meaning to get it, always thinking there was time. The money from his last job would cover the funeral expenses, and not much else. My parents had died years before, and Frank's mother lived on a fixed income in a senior apartment complex in Florida. My sister Margie was between husbands and jobs, living in a studio apartment in Tucson. There was no cavalry coming to rescue us. The next morning, I put on my best dress, the one I wore to church on Sundays, and walked into Millfield Diner. I'd never worked as a waitress before, but I knew how to smile, how to be efficient, how to make people feel welcome. Old Mr. Peterson hired me on the spot, partly out of pity, partly because his previous morning waitress had just quit to move to Florida. That first year was the hardest. Waking Jessica for school, dropping her at the before-school program at 5:45 a.m., working the breakfast and lunch shifts at the diner, picking her up by 4 p.m., helping with homework, making dinner, falling into bed exhausted only to do it all again the next day. On weekends, I cleaned houses for extra money while Jessica stayed with Mrs. Peabody next door. I remember one night, finding Jessica crying silently in her bed. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, gathering her into my arms. "Lily Peters is having a birthday party at the skating rink," she sobbed. "Everyone's going. But it costs $15, and I know we don't have extra money. My heart broke. I thought of the electric bill sitting unpaid on the kitchen counter, the empty gas tank in the car, the peanut butter sandwiches we'd had for dinner 3 nights in a row. "You're going to that party," I told her, wiping her tears. "And you'll have the prettiest gift for Lily, too." That weekend, I sold my wedding ring, the small diamond Frank had saved for months to buy. It wasn't worth much, but it was enough for the party fee, a new dress for Jessica from the department store, and a Barbie doll for Lily. Watching Jessica's face light up when I told her she could go was worth every twinge of loss I felt without that ring. As the years passed, I became a master of sacrifice disguised as normalcy. When Jessica needed a computer for school, I took on bookkeeping for the local hardware store at night. When she joined the swim team, I picked up Sunday shifts at the diner. When college applications loomed, I remortgaged the house to ensure she had options. She never knew about the nights I sat at the kitchen table, calculator in hand, moving imaginary money between columns, trying to conjure funds from thin air. She never saw me standing in the grocery store, putting back a carton of eggs because it would put us over budget. She never heard me negotiating with the electric company, begging for 1 more week to pay the bill. All she saw was a mother who said no to name-brand jeans, who insisted on generic cereal, who seemed obsessed with turning off lights and taking shorter showers. She saw the practical, penny-pinching side of me because that was all I could afford to show her. The college fund, the one she overheard us arguing about when she was 16, that was the cruelest misunderstanding of all. Frank had started it the day she was born, faithfully putting aside $50 from each paycheck. After his death, I couldn't maintain those contributions, not with the mortgage and basic survival taking every cent. By her sophomore year of high school, when college was looming large, I was in a panic. That night, Jessica was supposed to be at her friend Amanda's house studying. Frank's brother Robert had come to visit, a rare occurrence since the funeral. We sat at the kitchen table, going over the pathetically small college fund, and my even more pathetic salary. "It's a waste to spend it all on her education," I said, the words she overheard. But what she didn't hear was the rest. "When it won't even cover a single year's tuition. We need a better plan, Robert. She deserves a chance at a good school, not just community college. She's so bright, so capable." Robert had connections at Northeastern University. His wife's cousin was on the admissions committee. He was there that night to help us strategize how to maximize Jessica's chances for scholarships, how to present our financial need in the most compelling way. She never heard that part of the conversation, never knew that I spent the next 2 years working 7 days a week to add to her college fund, never saw me writing letters to every scholarship committee in Massachusetts, tracking down distant relatives for contributions, selling the antique hutch that had been my grandmother's to pay for her campus visits. When the acceptance letter from Northeastern came, along with a partial scholarship, I cried with joy and relief. When she graduated 4 years later, I stood in the audience bursting with pride, even though I was wearing a dress from the thrift store and shoes with holes carefully colored in with black marker. All those years, every penny saved, every extra shift worked, every small luxury denied, it was all for her, not from love of money, but from love of my daughter. And now, with 6 months left to live, I was a stranger to her. The woman who had given everything was seen as nothing but greedy and controlling. The irony cut deep. I had succeeded too well at hiding our financial struggles. In protecting her from worry, I had created a daughter who couldn't see the sacrifice behind the frugality, who mistook survival for avarice. The will she so casually dismissed held the final piece of the puzzle, the truth about her father, about our life, about why money had always been such a complicated subject in our home. A truth I had kept hidden for decades, believing it was better for her not to know. But now, with death approaching, and my daughter married to a stranger, believing the worst of me, I wondered if my lifetime of protective secrets had been my greatest mistake of all. The "for sale" sign went up in front of the diner on a Tuesday. By Wednesday afternoon, the entire town of Millfield was buzzing with the news. Eleanor Walsh was selling her business. Eleanor Walsh was sick. Eleanor Walsh was dying. I hadn't told anyone except Thomas Blackwell, my lawyer, and Rita, my head waitress. But small towns have a way of uncovering secrets, particularly the tragic ones. Perhaps it was the hospital calling to confirm my next appointment while I was in the back office, door ajar. Perhaps it was the pamphlets about hospice care I'd absent-mindedly left on the counter. Perhaps it was simply the weight of mortality that hung around my shoulders now, visible to those who knew how to look. The diner was unusually busy that week. Regulars coming in more frequently, staying longer, leaving larger tips. Their eyes followed me as I moved between tables, their conversations dropping to whispers when I approached. No one asked directly, but their concern manifested in other ways. Mrs. Peabody brought me a casserole. Tom offered to fix the leaky faucet in the back. Sarah from the florist shop sent over a bouquet with a card that simply said, "Thinking of you." I accepted their kindness with grace but kept my dignity intact. I didn't want pity. I didn't want to spend my remaining months being treated like a tragic figure, a cautionary tale. I wanted normalcy, for as long as I could maintain it. On Friday evening, as I was closing up, the bell above the door jingled. I looked up to see Robert, Frank's brother, standing there, hat in hand. I hadn't seen him since Jessica's college graduation 7 years ago. "Hello, Eleanor," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. I heard. I wiped my hands on my apron. News travels fast. Margie called me. Of course, my sister, 3 states away, had somehow heard before Robert, who lived just 2 towns over. She said, "You're selling the diner." I nodded, gesturing for him to sit at the counter. I poured us both coffee, though neither of us really wanted it. It was just something to do with our hands. "How bad is it?" he asked finally. 6 months. Maybe less now. He stared into his coffee cup. "And Jessica? How's she taken it?" The question pierced me. "She's distant. We haven't been close for years." Robert looked up sharply. "She doesn't know about Frank, does she? You never told her." I shook my head. "I thought I was protecting her." "Eleanor." His voice was gentle but reproachful. "Don't you think it's time?" Before I could answer, the bell jingled again. I looked up, expecting another concerned townsperson, maybe the minister or one of the ladies from the church auxiliary. Instead, I saw Jessica, and beside her, a tall man with glasses, who I assumed must be Andrew, the husband I'd never met. My heart leaped. She had come. Despite everything, she had come to me. "Jessica," I breathed, moving toward her. "I'm so glad you're here," but her expression stopped me cold. It wasn't reconciliation in her eyes. It was fury. "So it's true," she said, her voice tight. "You're selling the diner, your precious business." I glanced at Robert, then back at my daughter. "Yes, I can't manage it anymore. Not with the cancer." "Don't," she cut me off. "Don't use your illness as an excuse. You've been looking for a buyer for months, way before your diagnosis." Confusion washed over me. "What? No, that's not true." "Really?" She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen a few times, then thrust it toward me. "Then explain this." It was an email, dated 3 months earlier, from a commercial real estate agent to an address I didn't recognize. It mentioned the Walsh property, and your interest in purchasing the location, and the owner's willingness to consider offers in the right range. "I don't understand," I said, genuinely baffled. "I never authorized anyone to—" "Stop lying, Mom," Jessica snapped. "Just stop. Andrew works for Crestview Development. They've been trying to buy this block for months to build condos. His boss got this email from a broker claiming to represent you, claiming you were eager to sell for the right price." I looked at the man standing silently beside my daughter, this stranger who was her husband, who worked for a company trying to demolish my diner, my livelihood, the building where I'd spent more than half my life. "I didn't send this," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I didn't authorize anyone to negotiate on my behalf." Jessica laughed bitterly. "Of course you did. It's what you've always wanted, the biggest payday possible. And now you're using your condition to rush it through before anyone asks too many questions." The accusation was so absurd, so painfully wrong, that for a moment I couldn't speak. Robert stood up beside me, his presence solid and reassuring. "Jessica," he said firmly, "your mother is telling the truth. She only decided to sell after her diagnosis. Someone has been misrepresenting themselves." Jessica barely glanced at him. "Uncle Robert, of course you'd defend her. You always took her side." "There are no sides here, Jessie," I said, using the childhood nickname without thinking. "Just a misunderstanding that we can clear up if you'll listen." "I've been listening to your excuses my whole life," she interrupted. "About why we couldn't afford things, about why you were always working. about why money was more important than anything else. Each word was a knife, twisting deeper. "That's not true," I whispered. "Isn't it?" Her eyes were bright with tears now. "Do you know what Andrew found when his company researched this property? The diner is worth 3 times what I thought. And the house? You've been sitting on property worth a fortune while telling me we barely had enough to get by." Andrew shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. I wanted to ask him how dare he investigate me. How dare he discuss my financial situation with my daughter? How dare he stand in my diner judging me when he didn't know the first thing about my life? But I bit back the words. He was Jessica's husband, and antagonizing him would only push her further away. "The diner wasn't worth much until recently," I said carefully. "The downtown revitalization project. Save it." Jessica held up a hand. "I didn't come here for explanations. I came to tell you that I know what you're doing. Selling everything now, before," she faltered, "before you die, so you can control where the money goes. Well, don't worry about leaving anything to me. I don't want it." The cruelty of her assumption, that I was rushing to sell out of greed rather than necessity, left me breathless. That she could believe I was capable of using my own death as a financial maneuver was beyond comprehension. "Jessica, please," I said, reaching for her hand. She stepped back, as if my touch might burn her. "We're leaving now. I just needed you to know that I see through you. I always have." As she turned to go, Robert spoke up. "Jessica, wait. There's something you don't know. Something about your father." She paused, her back to us. For a moment, I thought she might listen. Then Andrew placed his hand on her lower back, guiding her toward the door, and the moment was lost. "Goodbye, Mom," she said without turning around. "I hope you get a good price for the diner. It's what matters most to you, after all." The bell jingled cheerfully as they left, the sound incongruously bright in the awful silence that followed. I sank onto a stool, my legs suddenly unable to support me. The pain in my abdomen, which I'd been ignoring all day, flared sharply. "Eleanor?" Robert's voice seemed to come from far away. "Eleanor, are you all right?" I wasn't all right. Nothing was all right. My daughter, my only child, had just publicly accused me of being a greedy, manipulative liar, had walked away believing the absolute worst of me, and she had done it with a husband she'd never introduced me to, a man who worked for a company that had been trying to take my business through deception. The humiliation burned hotter than the cancer in my body, that the whole town would know by morning, not just about my illness, but about my daughter's contempt for me, was almost unbearable. "I need to sit down," I managed to say. Robert helped me to a booth, his arms steady around my shoulders. "I'm calling an ambulance," he said, reaching for his phone. "No," I said firmly, though the room was starting to spin. "No hospitals, not tonight." "Then I'm taking you home," he insisted. "And I'm staying with you. No arguments." Too weak to protest, I let him lock up the diner and guide me to his car. As we drove through the familiar streets of Millfield, past the post office where I mailed Jessica's college applications, past the park where she learned to ride a bike, past the high school where she graduated as valedictorian, I felt something shift inside me. The shame and hurt began to harden into something else, a resolve I hadn't felt in years, the protective instinct that had guided my entire life, the need to shield Jessica from pain, from worry, from harsh reality, had failed spectacularly. In trying to protect her, I had lost her. It was time for a different approach, time for the truth, all of it, whether she wanted to hear it or not. Time to stop being the sacrificial mother who bore all burdens in silence. "Robert," I said as we pulled into my driveway, "I need you to call Thomas Blackwell tonight. Tell him I want to make some changes to the will." I woke at dawn, the familiar pain in my abdomen a dull companion now. Robert was asleep on the couch downstairs. I could hear his soft snoring through the floor. For a moment I lay still, watching the early light filter through the curtains I'd sewn myself 20 years ago to save money. Save money. Always saving money. In Jessica's eyes, that frugality had transformed from necessity to obsession to character flaw. She thought I loved money. The truth was, I'd never loved money. I'd feared its absence. There's a difference that Jessica had never understood, having been sheltered from true financial insecurity her whole life. As I carefully sat up, mindful of the pain, I caught sight of myself in the dresser mirror. I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. Thin, gray, diminished. Cancer was having its way with my body, but it was the weight of Jessica's accusations that had hollowed out my eyes. Enough, I thought suddenly. Enough martyrdom, enough silence, enough protection that had backfired so spectacularly. I had spent my entire adult life being practical Eleanor, sacrificing Eleanor, invisible Eleanor. I had worked myself to the bone to give Jessica a better life than mine, and in return, she saw me as nothing but a money-hungry manipulator. The unfairness of it struck me anew, not with pain this time, but with righteous anger. I got dressed slowly, choosing actual clothes instead of my usual robe, slacks, a blouse, even a touch of the lipstick I saved for special occasions. Today was a special occasion, though no one else would know it. Today was the day Eleanor Walsh stopped disappearing. Downstairs, Robert was already awake, making coffee in the kitchen. He looked up as I entered, surprise registering on his face. "You look determined," he said. I smiled, feeling the unfamiliar stretch of facial muscles. "I am. Thomas Blackwell called back last night after you were asleep," he said, handing me a mug. "He can see you at 10 this morning." "Good." I sipped the coffee, grateful for its warmth and strength. "And I need you to do something else for me today. Something important." Robert nodded, no questions asked. He had always been the quiet one in the family, steady where Frank had been charismatic, reliable where Frank had been impulsive. In the years after Frank's death, he'd kept his distance. Guilt, I'd always assumed, for surviving when his brother hadn't, but he'd shown up for the important moments. Jessica's high school graduation, her college acceptance, and now, my final chapter. "Anything, Eleanor. I need you to find this real estate broker who's been claiming to represent me, the one who contacted Andrew's company." His eyebrows rose. "You think someone's been impersonating you? Why?" I shrugged, wincing slightly at the movement. "I don't know yet, but it's not a coincidence that my daughter's husband works for the very company trying to buy my property." "You think Andrew might be involved?" The question hung in the air between us. Was I really suggesting that my son-in-law, a man I'd met exactly once, might be conspiring against me? It seemed paranoid, the kind of suspicion that comes with age and isolation. And yet, "I don't know," I said finally, "but I know I didn't authorize anyone to negotiate the sale of the diner before my diagnosis. And I know Jessica didn't marry this man for no reason. I want to understand what's happening." Robert nodded, pulling out his phone. "I'll make some calls. I still have contacts in real estate from when I was in commercial banking." "Thank you." I hesitated, then added, "And there's one more thing. I need you to go to Boston, to Jessica's apartment." "Eleanor," his tone was cautious. "After yesterday, I don't think she'll talk to either of us." "I don't expect her to," I said. "But she needs to see these." I pulled a stack of envelopes from my purse, the contents of that locked dresser drawer. "She won't accept them from me, but you might have a chance." He took the envelopes, glancing at the top one. His eyes widened. "Are these everything?" I confirmed. "The truth about Frank, about the money, about why her name is first in the will." I took a deep breath. "I've protected her from reality her whole life. It hasn't worked. It's time she knows everything." The determination that had awoken with me solidified into something harder, sharper. I wasn't just Eleanor the mother anymore. I was Eleanor the woman, Eleanor the business owner, Eleanor with 6 months or less to live, and no more patience for misunderstandings. After Robert left, I called Rita and told her the diner would remain closed for the day. Then I drove myself to Thomas Blackwell's office in the center of town. The 5-block drive took effort that I hadn't anticipated. The pain medication was helping, but each day brought a new reckoning with my body's betrayal. Thomas's office was above the hardware store, accessed by a narrow staircase that left me breathless. He met me at the top, concern etched on his face. "Eleanor," he said, taking my arm to steady me. "You should have called. I would have come to you." "I'm not an invalid yet," I replied, though the statement felt less true with each passing day. Inside his office, with its view of Millfield's modest main street, I sank gratefully into the leather chair across from his desk. Thomas and I had known each other for decades. He had handled Frank's estate, such as it was, and had been my legal advisor through the purchase of the diner, the refinancing of the house, Jessica's college planning, and now, my own mortality. "Robert said you want to make changes to your will," he said, getting straight to business. "Yes." I leaned forward, ignoring the twinge in my side. "I want to remove the conditions. Thomas frowned. Eleanor, we've discussed this. The conditions are there to protect Jessica, to ensure that the conditions were a mistake. I interrupted. I thought I was doing the right thing, protecting her from the truth. But all I've done is created distance. She thinks I care more about money than about her. And you think removing the conditions will change that perception? His voice was gentle but skeptical. No, I admitted. But it might be a start. And more importantly, it's the right thing to do. Jessica is an adult. She's married. The word still felt strange on my tongue. She has the right to make her own decisions, even if I don't agree with them. Thomas sighed, removing his glasses to polish them, a habit I recognized as his way of buying time to think. I have to advise against this, Eleanor. You set up those conditions for very specific reasons. Nothing has changed except your relationship with Jessica, which is strained at the moment. But relationships can heal. Decisions made in haste cannot always be undone. I'm dying, Thomas, I said bluntly. There is no, at the moment. There is only now. And right now, my daughter believes I'm a controlling, money-obsessed old woman who wants to manipulate her from beyond the grave. He winced at my directness, but didn't contradict me. And you believe removing the conditions will change her mind? I don't know, I said honestly. But I know that the current arrangement isn't working. It's time for a new approach. Thomas replaced his glasses, his expression resigned. I'll draw up the amendments today. But I wanted on record that I advised against this. Duly noted. I smiled at his formality. And there's one more thing. I want to add a letter to the will. A personal letter to Jessica, to be read along with the legal documents. That can be arranged? He pulled out a legal pad. Now, let's go through the specifics of the changes you want to make. An hour later, I left Thomas's office with a sense of lightness I hadn't felt in years. The weight of secrets, of protection disguised as control, was lifting. I was no longer the custodian of truths too heavy for Jessica to bear. Soon, she would know everything, whether she wanted to or not. As I walked carefully down the stairs, holding the railing tightly, my phone rang. It was Robert. I found him, he said without preamble. The broker who contacted Andrew's company. His name is Marcus Delaney, and he doesn't work for any firm I recognize. But he's been approaching several developers about the Walsh property for months. Who is he? How did he know about the diner? That's the interesting part, Robert said. He's new to the area. Moved to Boston about a year ago. And here's the connection. He used to work for Crestview Development, the same company that employs Andrew. The pieces clicked into place with cold clarity. They're working together, I said. Andrew and this Marcus person. It looks that way, Robert confirmed. And Eleanor, there's something else. I did a bit more digging. Andrew Reynolds isn't just an employee at Crestview. His father is James Reynolds, the CEO. This is the family business. The implications crashed over me like a wave. My daughter had married into a family that wanted to destroy my business, my livelihood. Had she known? Was this marriage part of some elaborate scheme to get access to my property? Or was Jessica as much a pawn as I was? What about Jessica? I asked, my voice tight. Did you see her? Did you give her the envelopes? I tried, Robert said, and I could hear the regret in his voice. She wouldn't come to the door. The doorman called up, but she refused to see me. I left the envelopes with him, but he trailed off. But there was no guarantee she would ever read them. No guarantee she would learn the truth before it was too late. Thank you for trying, I said, surprised by how calm I felt. The old Eleanor would have been devastated. The new Eleanor was already planning her next move. What are you going to do? Robert asked. I looked up at the sky. Clear blue. The kind of perfect fall day that New England does so well. The kind of day that reminds you how precious each moment is, especially when your moments are numbered. I'm going to fight, I said simply. Not just for the truth, but for what's mine. What I've worked for all these years. The woman who had spent a lifetime fading into the background, sacrificing silently, putting everyone else first, was awake now, and she wasn't going down without making her voice heard. The manila envelope arrived by courier the next morning. No return address, just my name in unfamiliar handwriting. The delivery man required a signature, which seemed odd for an ordinary package. As I signed, he looked at me strangely, almost sympathetically. Have a nice day, Mrs. Walsh, he said with unusual emphasis. Inside, I found a USB drive and a single type note. Thought you should see this before making any decisions about the diner. A concerned friend. My first instinct was to throw it away. Anonymous packages with cryptic messages rarely contained good news. But curiosity, or perhaps that new sense of fight that had awoken in me, won out. I took the drive to my ancient desktop computer, the one Jessica had insisted on buying me 5 Christmases ago, though I rarely used it for more than occasional emails and recipes. The drive contained a single video file. When I clicked play, my kitchen filled with the voices of strangers. Sure, this will work. A young man, sitting in what appeared to be an upscale office. The camera angle suggested a hidden recording device. As the image focused, I recognized him. Andrew, Jessica's husband. Trust me. Another man, older, leaning back in a leather chair behind a desk. We've been working on the Walsh property for months. The old lady doesn't even realize what it's worth. But my wife, Andrew began. Your wife is the key, the older man interrupted. Without her, we'd never get past all the sentimental bullshit. My mother's diner, my childhood home. But with Jessica involved, we have an inside track. She still thinks her mother might leave her something substantial, Andrew said, his voice careful. But I've been working on that, reinforcing the idea that her mother's always been stingy, secretive about money. Good. The older man, James Reynolds, I presumed, Andrew's father, nodded approvingly. Keep pushing that angle. The more Jessica resents her mother, the easier this will be when the old woman finally kicks it. Cancer, was it? Pancreatic, Andrew confirmed. And the casual way he discussed my death sent a chill through me. Terminal. 6 months at most, according to the doctor. Perfect timing with the downtown revitalization. Once we acquire that block, we can break ground on the condos by next summer. But what if she doesn't sell? Andrew asked. What if she leaves everything to Jessica with conditions? James Reynolds laughed, a cold sound. That's why we have Marcus working the angle from the other side, making it look like she's already considering offers, creating distrust. And if all else fails, he shrugged, we wait for nature to take its course, contest whatever will she leaves, and drag it out in court. Jessica is the only heir. Eventually, one way or another, that property will be ours. The video ended abruptly, leaving me staring at my own reflection in the dark screen, my face pale with shock and rage. They were using my daughter, using her pain, her misunderstandings, her complicated feelings about me to manipulate her, and she had no idea. To her, Andrew was a loving husband, not a plant in a real estate scheme orchestrated by his father. My hands were shaking as I ejected the USB drive. Who had sent this to me? Who would have had access to record such a private conversation? And more importantly, what was I going to do with this information? The answer came to me with perfect clarity. I would protect my daughter, one last time, not by hiding the truth, but by exposing it. I reached for the phone, then hesitated. Jessica wouldn't believe me if I simply told her what I'd seen. She'd dismiss it as another manipulation, another attempt to control her life. I needed proof she couldn't deny, and I needed allies. My first call was to Rita, my longtime waitress and the closest thing I had to a friend. Rita, I need a favor, I said when she answered. A big one. Anything, Eleanor, she replied without hesitation. I need you to contact that reporter from the county paper, the one who did the feature on the diner last year. Tell him I have a story about corruption and the downtown revitalization project. Eleanor, Rita's voice was cautious. Are you sure? You've always kept your business private. I'm sure, I said firmly. And I need one more thing. That nephew of yours who's good with computers. Could he transfer a video from a USB drive to something more secure? Something that can't be erased or claimed to be doctored? Wayne? Sure, he could do that. He works in IT at the hospital. Perfect. Ask him to meet me at the diner in an hour. And Rita, don't tell anyone else about this. Not yet. My second call was to Thomas Blackwell. I need to make another change to my will, I said when he answered. And I need it done today. Eleanor, he began, his tone suggesting he was about to lecture me on hasty decisions again. This isn't negotiable, Thomas, I interrupted. And I'm coming to your office now. Be ready. My final call was to Robert. I need you back in Millfield, I told him. Today. And bring whatever evidence you found about Marcus Delaney and his connection to Crestview Development. What's happened? He asked, concern evident in his voice. I have proof, I said simply. Proof of everything. And it's time Jessica knew the truth. All of it. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity that would have exhausted me even before the cancer. Meeting with Rita's nephew, who transferred the video to a secure cloud server and made backup copies. Sitting in Thomas's office, dictating the final amendments to my will. Talking with the local reporter, showing him the video. Watching his eyes widen with the realization that he had a major story on his hands. By late afternoon, I was back at home, exhausted but oddly energized. The secrets I had kept, both those forced upon me and those I had chosen, were about to be exposed. The diner, the house, the will, the truth about Frank, and now, the conspiracy involving Andrew and his father. Everything was coming to light. I was making tea in the kitchen when I heard a car pull into my driveway. Through the window, I saw Jessica getting out, alone. My heart leaped into my throat. Had she read the envelopes Robert had left? Had she somehow learned about the video? I opened the door before she could knock. She stood on the porch, her expression unreadable. In her hands were the envelopes, still sealed. "Jessica," I said, relief washing over me. "Come in." She hesitated, then stepped inside, looking around as if seeing the house for the first time. "Nothing's changed," she murmured. "Some things never do," I replied. "Would you like some tea?" She shook her head. "I came because Uncle Robert said it was important, that I needed to read these." She held up the envelopes. "But I wanted you to be here when I did, in case I have questions." The olive branch was small, tentative, but it was there. I led her to the living room, where we sat on opposite ends of the sofa, close enough to talk, far enough to maintain the emotional distance between us. "Before you open those," I said carefully, "there's something else you need to see." I took my laptop from the coffee table and pulled up the video Rita's nephew had secured for me. This was sent to me anonymously this morning. I don't know who recorded it, but you need to watch it. Jessica frowned, but said nothing as I pressed play. As the conversation between Andrew and his father unfolded, I watched her face, confusion giving way to disbelief, then shock, then a terrible understanding. That can't be real," she whispered when it ended. "Andrew wouldn't—" "I'm sorry, Jessica," I said gently, "but it is real. Andrew's father wants the diner and this house for his development project. They've been manipulating both of us." She stood abruptly, pacing across the worn carpet. "No, this is another one of your manipulations. You've never approved of anyone I've dated. You're trying to control me, just like always. Jessica." I kept my voice calm, though my heart was racing. Why would I fabricate something like this? What would I gain? "Control," she exclaimed. "You've always wanted to control everything. My life, your money, the diner. You couldn't stand that I married someone without your approval, so you're trying to destroy my marriage." The old Eleanor would have backed down, would have prioritized Jessica's feelings over the truth, but the new Eleanor, the awakened Eleanor, held firm. "If you don't believe the video, believe these," I said, gesturing to the envelopes in her hand. "Read them, then decide who's been trying to control your life." She looked down at the envelopes, then back at me, conflict evident in her eyes. Finally, she sat down and opened the first one. Inside was a letter from Frank, her father, dated a week before his death, a letter I had kept hidden for 22 years. As she read, tears filled her eyes. "Dad knew he was dying," she whispered. I nodded. "The accident wasn't entirely an accident, Jessica. Your father was sick, cancer like me. He had life insurance, but the policy had a suicide exclusion. If they ruled his death a suicide, we would get nothing." She moved to the second envelope. Inside were the medical reports, the insurance documents, the police report that listed Frank's death as an accident despite the suspicious circumstances. The truth I had protected her from, that her beloved father, facing a terminal diagnosis and mounting medical bills, had made a desperate choice to provide for his family the only way he could. "The insurance money," she said slowly. "The money you were so careful with. It wasn't just any money. It was blood money," I said quietly. "Your father's final gift to us. I couldn't waste it. I couldn't dishonor his sacrifice by being careless with what he died to provide." The third envelope contained bank statements, years of them, showing the modest growth of her college fund, the second mortgage I'd taken on the house to supplement it, the loans I was still paying off, the careful management of limited resources that had allowed her to attend Northeastern without crippling debt. "You weren't being stingy," she said, her voice small. "You were being responsible." "I was being a mother," I corrected gently. "Your mother, trying to give you the opportunities your father and I never had." The final envelope contained a copy of the original will, the one with the conditions she had so resented. Conditions that required her to complete her education, to establish a career, to show financial independence before receiving her inheritance. Not conditions designed to control, but to protect, to ensure that she developed the skills to manage what would someday be hers. Your name was first, because you were always first, Jessica. Every decision I made, every penny I saved, every extra shift I worked, it was all for you. Not because I loved money, but because I loved you. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "Why didn't you tell me any of this? All these years I thought I was protecting you," I said. "From the pain of knowing how your father died, from the burden of our financial struggles. I wanted you to have a normal childhood, a normal life. I didn't want you to feel guilty about the sacrifices we made for you. So instead, you let me think you were cold and controlling and obsessed with money." The accusation had no heat now, just sadness. "I made a mistake," I admitted. "A lifetime of mistakes, perhaps. I thought I was doing the right thing, but in protecting you from pain, I created distance between us. I'm sorry, Jessica. Truly sorry." She moved closer on the sofa, the envelopes clutched to her chest. "And now, what about Andrew? Is what I saw in that video really true?" I took her hand, feeling how cold it was. "I believe it is. Robert has been investigating. Marcus Delaney, the broker who claimed to represent me, used to work for Andrew's father. They've been trying to acquire the diner property for months." "But why?" she asked. "It's just a small-town diner." "Not anymore," I explained. "The downtown revitalization project has changed everything. That block is now prime real estate for development. Andrew's family wants to build luxury condos there." She pulled her hand away, standing again. "I need to talk to Andrew. Confront him with this." "Jessica, wait," I said urgently. "Think this through. If what we suspect is true, if he married you as part of his father's scheme, then I need to know," she said firmly. "I need to hear it from him." I recognized the determination in her eyes. It was the same expression I'd seen in the mirror just days ago. My daughter was awakening too, discovering her own strength, her own voice. "At least let Robert be with you," I pleaded. "He'll be here soon. For safety, Jessica. Please." She hesitated, then nodded. "All right. For safety. But I'm doing this, Mom. I need to know the truth." As we waited for Robert to arrive, Jessica looked around the living room, her eyes lingering on the familiar photos, the worn furniture, the small touches that made this house a home. "I always thought you could afford better," she said softly. "That you chose not to spend money because because you enjoyed having it more than using it." "Money was never the point," I told her. "Security was. The knowledge that we would never be homeless, never go hungry, never be at the mercy of others, that you would have opportunities I never had." She picked up a photo from the side table, herself at 18, in her cap and gown, flanked by me and Robert. "I was so angry that day," she confessed. "Everyone else's parents were giving them cars, taking them on graduation trips. You gave me a card with $200. I thought you were being cheap. That $200 was my entire emergency fund at the time," I said without self-pity. "I wanted you to have something for college expenses, something that was just yours, not earmarked for tuition or books." She set the photo down carefully. "I had no idea. All these years, I had no idea." The sound of a car in the driveway interrupted us. Robert had arrived. The time for revelations was ending. The time for action was beginning. As Jessica moved to the door to greet her uncle, she paused, turning back to me. "Mom," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I'm sorry for everything I said, for everything I believed about you. I was wrong." In that moment, the wall between us, the wall built of secrets and misunderstandings and protective half-truths, began to crumble, and I knew, whatever happened next with Andrew, with the diner, with the few months I had left, this reconciliation was worth all of it. "I love you, Jessica," I said simply. "I always have, and I always will." She nodded, tears spilling over again. "I know that now. I finally know." Robert arrived with a thick folder tucked under his arm and a grim determination on his face. He embraced Jessica wordlessly, the estrangement of recent years forgotten in the face of more urgent matters. We gathered around my kitchen table, the same table where Frank and I had once dreamed of our future, where I had paid bills by candlelight when the electricity was cut off, where Jessica had done her homework under my watchful eye. "I've been busy," Robert said, spreading documents across the wooden surface. "Marcus Delaney isn't just connected to Crestview Development. He's James Reynolds' former brother-in-law, Andrew's uncle on his mother's side." Jessica's face paled. "So this is a family operation?" "It appears so," Robert confirmed. "I spoke with 3 other property owners on your block, Eleanor. All of them have been approached by Delaney in the past 6 months, all with claims that you were eager to sell and that they should get on board before being left behind. They've been isolating me," I said, understanding dawning, "making it seem like I'm the difficult one, the holdout." "Exactly." Robert pointed to a map of downtown Millfield. "Crestview needs the entire block for their development plan. Your diner is the cornerstone property, the most visible, the most valuable in terms of location. Without it, their project loses significant value." "But why go to all this trouble?" Jessica asked. "Why not just make Mom a fair offer? Or wait until—" She couldn't finish the sentence, the reality of my prognosis still too raw. "Because of the will," I said quietly. "The conditions I placed on your inheritance." Robert nodded. "The conditions would have prevented any quick sale after Eleanor's death. The property would be held in trust until you met specific requirements. From Crestview's perspective, that could mean years of delay. So they needed to either convince me to sell before I died, or convince Jessica to oppose the conditions of the will," I concluded. "And the easiest way to do both was to drive a wedge between us. And to marry one of their own into the family," Robert added, looking apologetically at Jessica. "I'm sorry, but the timing is too perfect to be coincidental. You met Andrew how long ago?" "1.5 years," she said, her voice hollow. "At a charity event in Boston. He said he was there supporting a friend's organization." "A charity event you attended because—" Robert prompted. "Because I was invited by a new client at my firm. I'm an architect," she explained, turning to me. "The client was launching a urban renewal foundation. They specifically requested me for their project." Robert pulled out another document from his folder. "The Urban Spaces Foundation, founded 18 months ago by Elaine Winters, who is James Reynolds' cousin," Jessica finished, the pieces clicking into place. "It was all staged. They researched me, created an entire foundation to put me in Andrew's path." Her hands clenched into fists on the table. "I was targeted, used. My whole relationship is a lie." My heart broke for her. The betrayal she was facing was far worse than anything I had experienced. "We don't know that for certain," I said, trying to soften the blow. "Perhaps Andrew genuinely fell in love with you, regardless of how you met." "The video suggests otherwise, Mom," she said bitterly. "But why would someone record that conversation?" I wondered aloud. "And why send it to me now?" Robert and Jessica exchanged glances. "That's actually why I was late," Robert said. "I received a call on my way here, from Andrew's mother, Diane Reynolds. She's the one who sent the video." "What?" Jessica and I exclaimed simultaneously. "She's divorcing James," Robert explained. "Apparently she's been gathering evidence of his business improprieties for months, preparing for a messy legal battle. When she discovered he was using their son, and by extension Jessica, in one of his schemes, she decided to intervene." "She recorded her own husband and son?" Jessica asked incredulously. "According to Diane, Andrew is his father's puppet, has been his whole life. She hoped that by exposing the scheme she could free both you and Andrew from James's manipulation." Jessica stood abruptly, pacing the small kitchen. "This is insane. My entire life for the past 1.5 years has been orchestrated by people I've never even met. For a piece of property. For condos. Not just any property," I corrected gently. "Your inheritance. Your birthright, in a sense. What your father and I worked for your entire life." She stopped pacing, looking at me with new understanding. "That's why you were so careful with money. Why you held on to the diner, the house. Despite all the work, all the strain. You were preserving my inheritance. I was preserving our legacy," I said. "Not just the physical property, but what it represents. Stability, independence, the fruits of honest work. Everything I wanted you to value. And I threw it back in your face," she whispered. "Called you greedy, Obsessed with money. You didn't know the truth, I said. I kept too many secrets, trying to protect you. That stops now. Robert cleared his throat. There's more. The reporter Eleanor spoke with. He's been doing some digging of his own. Apparently, Crestview has a history of these tactics. They've been investigated twice for fraudulent practices, but charges were dropped both times after witnesses suddenly changed their stories. Intimidation? I asked. Or payoffs, Robert suggested. Either way, they play dirty, and now they know we're onto them. James Reynolds called the editor of the county paper this afternoon, threatening a lawsuit if they publish any defamatory stories about Crestview. So what do we do? Jessica asked, looking between us. How do we fight this? For the first time in my life, I felt a smile cross my face at the prospect of conflict. The old Eleanor would have tried to avoid confrontation, to find a quiet, dignified solution. The new Eleanor wanted justice, not just for herself, but for her daughter, for the memory of Frank, for the lifetime of sacrifice that Crestview wanted to erase with luxury condos. We fight with the truth, I said firmly. All of it, out in the open. I outlined my plan, a plan that had been forming since I first watched that video, that had crystallized as Jessica read the long hidden letters and documents, a plan that required courage, timing, and the one thing I had in abundance, nothing left to lose. The Downtown Revitalization Committee is meeting tomorrow night at Town Hall, I explained. It's a public meeting. James Reynolds is scheduled to present Crestview's development proposal. I'm going to be there, with copies of everything. The video, the evidence of Marcus Delaney's false representation, the documentation of Crestview's previous investigations. Mom, no, Jessica protested. You're not well enough. I'm well enough for this, I insisted. This may be my last chance to set things right. For the town, for you, for myself. I won't waste it. You won't be alone, Robert said firmly. I'll be with you. So will I, Jessica added, determination hardening her voice. And I have an idea of my own. She explained her plan, bold, unexpected, and with a touch of elegance that would have made Frank proud. As she spoke, I saw the architect in her, the strategic thinker, the woman who had inherited not just my determination but her father's creativity. It's risky, Robert cautioned when she finished. So is cancer, she replied with a glance at me. Sometimes the biggest risks yield the greatest rewards. We spent the next several hours preparing, organizing documents, making copies, writing statements, rehearsing what we would say. Jessica called in sick to work, clearing her schedule for the next day. Robert contacted a colleague who was a retired judge, seeking legal advice about our approach. I called Rita, asking her to spread the word about the town meeting, ensuring a large audience for what was to come. As evening fell, Jessica insisted on staying with me rather than returning to Boston, to the apartment she shared with Andrew. I can't face him right now, she admitted. Not until we've done this. We ordered pizza, a rare indulgence in my frugal household. As we ate around the kitchen table, a strange sense of peace settled over me. Despite the cancer, despite the conspiracy we were facing, despite the years of estrangement, my daughter was home. We were united against a common enemy, aligned in purpose and understanding for the first time in years. After dinner, while Robert made calls in the living room, Jessica helped me wash the few dishes. The domestic routine felt both foreign and familiar, a glimpse of what might have been, if we hadn't lost so many years to misunderstanding. I keep thinking about that conversation, Jessica said quietly, handing me a plate to dry, the one I overheard when I was 16. About my college fund being a waste. I wish you had confronted me then, I said. I could have explained. What were you really saying? What did I miss? I set the dried plate carefully in the cabinet. Your father had just died a year earlier. Robert was helping me figure out how to afford college for you. The fund Frank started was pathetically small. It would have covered maybe one semester at a state school. I was despairing, saying it was a waste to have such a small amount when you deserve so much more. Robert was the one who suggested leveraging the house, taking a second mortgage to supplement the fund. Jessica stared at me, realization dawning. So when I heard it's a waste to spend it all on her education, I meant the fund was wastefully inadequate for what you deserved, not that your education was a waste. I touched her cheek gently. You were the brightest child, Jessie. So smart, so talented. I would have mortgaged my soul to send you to college. You practically did, she said, glancing around the kitchen with its outdated appliances, its worn linoleum floor. All these years I thought you were choosing not to update the house, not to spend money on nicer things. I was choosing you, I said simply, every time. She hugged me then, a real embrace, the first in years. I held her tightly, feeling the vibrant life in her, smelling the expensive shampoo in her hair, aware of all the ways she had grown and changed in our years apart. "I'm sorry I wasted so much time being angry at you," she whispered against my shoulder. "I'm sorry I wasn't here when you got sick." "You're here now," I told her. "That's what matters." As we prepared for bed, Jessica in her old room, me in mine, Robert on the sofa downstairs, I felt a curious lightness despite the gravity of our situation. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, exposure, perhaps even legal complications. My health was failing, my energy limited, but for the first time in decades, I was living without the burden of secrets. My daughter knew the truth, about her father, about our finances, about the sacrifices that had shaped her life. Whatever happened tomorrow, whatever came in the months I had left, that honesty was a victory in itself. The diner, the house, the money, they were just things. Jessica's understanding, her presence in my life again, her knowledge of how deeply she was loved, those were the inheritance that truly mattered. I fell asleep with a sense of anticipation rather than dread. Tomorrow, Eleanor Walsh would no longer be invisible. Tomorrow, the woman who had spent a lifetime in the background would finally take center stage. The Millfield Town Hall was packed beyond capacity. Word had spread through the community with the swift efficiency that only small towns can manage. The downtown revitalization meeting, normally attended by a handful of business owners and concerned citizens, had become the hottest ticket in Millfield. Extra chairs had been brought in from the senior center next door. People stood along the walls, craned their necks from the hallway. They were there for me, for Eleanor Walsh, the quiet, practical diner owner who had served their eggs and coffee for decades without fanfare or complaint, the woman who was dying but had one last fight left in her. I sat in the front row, flanked by Jessica on one side and Robert on the other. Rita sat directly behind me, a solid presence at my back. Thomas Blackwell was positioned near the side door, ready with legal documents if needed. In my lap was a folder containing everything. The video transferred to a tablet, the evidence Robert had gathered, the letters and documents that revealed the truth. At the long table at the front of the room, Mayor Thompson called the meeting to order. Beside him sat the town council members, the head of the Chamber of Commerce, and, separate from the others, James Reynolds, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than a month of my diner's profits. Next to him was Andrew, looking uncomfortable, his eyes darting around the room until they landed on Jessica. His expression changed from anxiety to shock. He hadn't expected to see his wife here, in Millfield, sitting beside the mother she had supposedly disowned. Jessica met his gaze steadily, revealing nothing. We had agreed on our strategy. She would say nothing, make no accusations, until the moment was right. The element of surprise was crucial. Mayor Thompson went through the usual formalities, minutes from the previous meeting, updates on ongoing projects. Then he introduced James Reynolds of Crestview Development, inviting him to present his proposal for the downtown area. Reynolds stood with the confident air of a man accustomed to getting his way. Behind him, a sleek presentation appeared on the projector screen, architectural renderings of glass and steel condominiums rising where my diner and the neighboring businesses currently stood. Progress, he called it. Revitalization. The future of Millfield. As he spoke about property values and tax revenue and modernization, I felt the room's energy shift. These weren't abstract concepts to the people of Millfield. They were homes and businesses and lives. Reynolds was talking about erasing history, our history, and replacing it with something that had no connection to our community. The cornerstone of this development, Reynolds continued, will be the location currently occupied by Millfield Diner. I'm pleased to announce that we are in advanced negotiations with the owner, Eleanor Walsh, for the purchase of this property. A murmur ran through the crowd. Eyes turned toward me, questions in their gaze. I kept my expression neutral, waiting for my moment. Once the Walsh property is secured, the remaining businesses on the block have indicated their willingness to sell, Reynolds claimed smoothly. We anticipate breaking ground by early summer. Mayor Thompson looked confused. Mr. Reynolds, this is the first I'm hearing about Eleanor Walsh selling the diner. Eleanor, can you confirm this? My moment had arrived. I stood slowly, aware of every eye in the room upon me, aware too of the pain in my body that made each movement deliberate. No, Mayor Thompson, I cannot confirm that, I said, my voice stronger than I had expected. In fact, I can categorically deny it. I have never been in negotiations with Crestview Development. I have never indicated any willingness to sell my property, and until my diagnosis 3 weeks ago, I had no intention of selling the diner at all. Reynolds' confident smile faltered slightly. Mrs. Walsh, perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. My representative, Marcus Delaney, has been in discussions with you for months. That is a lie, I said clearly. I have never met nor spoken with anyone named Marcus Delaney. Any claims he has made to represent me are fraudulent. The murmur in the room grew louder. Mayor Thompson gavelled for order. Mr. Reynolds, this is a serious accusation. Do you have documentation of Mrs. Walsh's agreement to sell? Reynolds hesitated, glancing at Andrew, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. We have emails, preliminary discussions, forgeries, I interrupted, or communications with someone falsely claiming to represent me, and I can prove it. I nodded to Robert, who connected the tablet to the projection system, replacing Reynolds' sleek condominiums with the video we had received. Before I play this, I announced, I want to make it clear that this recording was made legally by Diane Reynolds, wife of James Reynolds and mother of Andrew Reynolds, and was provided to me voluntarily. Reynolds' face darkened. This is outrageous. Whatever my estranged wife claims, let the video speak for itself, Mayor Thompson said firmly. The room fell silent as the conversation between Andrew and his father played on the large screen, their voices filling the town hall, their scheme exposed in their own words. When it ended, the silence lingered for a long moment before erupting into angry exclamations. Reynolds attempted to regain control. This is obviously edited, taken out of context. There's more, I said, raising my voice over the din. Marcus Delaney is not a licensed real estate broker in Massachusetts. He is the former brother-in-law of James Reynolds. He has approached every business owner on this block, claiming to represent me, creating the false impression that I was eager to sell. I held up the documents Robert had gathered. We have statements from 3 other property owners confirming these fraudulent representations. We have evidence of Crestview's previous legal troubles in similar situations. And we have one more thing. I turned to Jessica, giving her a small nod. She stood, her posture straight, her voice clear. My name is Jessica Walsh Reynolds. I am Andrew's wife and Eleanor's daughter. I am also an architect with Barton & Associates in Boston. Andrew half rose from his seat. Jessica, what are you doing here? We should discuss this privately. No more private discussions, she said firmly. No more secrets. I learned yesterday that our entire relationship was orchestrated by your father as part of this development scheme, that I was targeted because of my connection to this property. The room erupted again. Mayor Thompson pounded his gavel repeatedly. Order! We will have order! When the noise subsided, Jessica continued, her voice steady despite the emotion I could see in her eyes. What none of you knew, what I didn't know until yesterday, is that I've been working on an alternative proposal for downtown Millfield, a proposal that preserves the historic character of this block while allowing for sustainable growth. She reached into her tote bag and pulled out a roll of architectural drawings, which Rita helped her unfurl across the table. Unlike Reynolds' cold glass and steel towers, Jessica's design showed the existing buildings restored, adapted, enhanced, with the diner as the centerpiece, its classic facade preserved while the interior and rear portions were expanded into a community space. This is real revitalization, Jessica explained, passion evident in her voice. Not erasure, not replacement. This plan maintains Millfield's unique character while creating sustainable housing, mixed-use spaces, and a central plaza for community events. And most importantly, it keeps the heart and soul of downtown intact. The crowd moved forward, eager to see her designs. The contrast with Reynolds' proposal was stark. Where his showed generic luxury that could have been anywhere, hers was specifically, uniquely Millfield, honoring its past while looking toward its future. This is all very touching, Reynolds said coldly, but ultimately irrelevant. The economics don't support this kind of sentimental preservation project. And while I'm sorry my son's marital issues are being aired in this inappropriate forum, they have no bearing on the business at hand. Actually, they do, Jessica replied, unfazed. Because as of this morning, I am the architect of record for the Millfield Downtown Preservation Initiative, a newly formed nonprofit organization created to purchase, preserve, and adapt the historic properties in this block, starting with my mother's diner. Reynolds laughed dismissively. And where exactly is this nonprofit getting its funding? From me, I said, rising again to stand beside my daughter. The diner has been profitable for 15 years, Mr. Reynolds. Unlike you, I believe in saving rather than spending. And my late husband left us well provided for, in ways you couldn't possibly understand. It wasn't entirely true. The nonprofit's funding was coming primarily from Robert, who had done well in his banking career, and from a consortium of local business owners Rita had quietly organized overnight. But Reynolds didn't need to know that. Not yet. Furthermore, Jessica added, Barton and Associates has agreed to donate their services for the initial phase of the project, and we've already secured preliminary approval from the Massachusetts Historical Commission for grants to support the restoration work. Reynolds' face had turned an alarming shade of red. This is absurd. A last-minute stunt by a dying woman and her estranged daughter can't possibly compete with what Crestview offers. Mayor Thompson, surely you see what I see, the mayor interrupted, is evidence of fraudulent representation, conspiracy, and attempts to manipulate our town's development process. I think we've heard enough from Crestview Development for today. Reynolds stood, gathering his materials with jerky movements. You haven't heard the last of this. My legal team will be in touch with all of you, and the district attorney will be in touch with you. Thomas Blackwell spoke up from his position by the door. I've already filed a formal complaint regarding Mr. Delaney's fraudulent representation. Wire fraud across state lines is a federal offense, Mr. Reynolds. Andrew remained seated as his father stormed toward the exit, his expression a mixture of shame and confusion. When James reached the door, he turned back. Andrew, we're leaving. Andrew looked at his father, then at Jessica, indecision plain on his face. He used you too, Andrew, Jessica said quietly. You don't have to keep following his orders. For a moment, I thought he might choose her, might stand up to his father, might try to salvage something from the wreckage of their relationship. Instead, he rose slowly and walked to the door, pausing only briefly beside Jessica. I'm sorry, he whispered. I did fall in love with you. That part was real. She didn't respond, her eyes forward, her posture rigid. Only I, standing beside her, could feel the slight trembling of her hand. When the Reynolds men had gone, Mayor Thompson called for a brief recess to digest these unexpected developments. The crowd surged around us, people I'd served for years, neighbors who had watched Jessica grow up, business owners from the threatened block. They wanted to see the plans, to hear more about the nonprofit, to offer their support. In the midst of the commotion, I felt myself growing lightheaded, the room starting to spin. The exertion of the confrontation, the emotional intensity, the constant pain I'd been ignoring, it all caught up with me at once. Mom? Jessica's voice seemed to come from far away. Mom, are you okay? I tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come. The room tilted sideways. Voices became muffled, and darkness crept in from the edges of my vision. The last thing I saw was Jessica's face, fear replacing triumph in her eyes as she reached out to catch me. Then nothing. I woke to the familiar antiseptic smell of a hospital room, the soft beeping of monitors, the distant squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum. For a disorienting moment, I thought I was back in time, recovering from some minor procedure, Frank dozing in the chair beside me. But when I turned my head, it was Jessica I saw, her head resting on her arms at the edge of my bed, her breathing deep and even in sleep. My movement woke her, and she sat up quickly, relief flooding her face. Mom, you're awake. How do you feel? Like I've been hit by a truck, I admitted, my voice rasping. What happened? You collapsed at the town hall, she explained, pouring me a cup of water. Dehydration, exhaustion, and the cancer. Dr. Michaels says you pushed yourself too hard. I took a sip of water, letting it soothe my parched throat. The meeting, Reynolds, is under investigation, she assured me. The DA's office is looking into the fraudulent representation, and the SEC is examining Crestviews business practices. Uncle Robert is handling all of that. You don't need to worry. I noticed the sunlight streaming through the window. How long have I been here? 2 days, she said, her eyes shadowed with worry. You were in and out the first day. They've got you on some pretty serious pain medication now. 2 days lost. With my limited time, that felt significant. The diner, the preservation project, it's all moving forward, Jessica assured me, squeezing my hand. Rita's coordinating with the other business owners. The town council voted unanimously to support our proposal over Crestviews. We've already received 3 grant applications for the historical restoration. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. Despite the worry, despite the exhaustion evident in the shadows beneath her eyes, she seemed different, stronger, more centered. The angry, suspicious woman who had confronted me in the diner just days ago was gone, replaced by someone who reminded me of myself, the best parts of myself. And Andrew? I asked gently. Her expression tightened. He's been calling, texting. I'm not ready to talk to him yet. I don't know if I ever will be. I'm sorry, I said, for all of it. She shook her head firmly. Don't be. None of this is your fault, and some good has come from it. She managed a small smile. We found our way back to each other. That's worth everything. Dr. Michaels came in then, checking my vitals, adjusting my medication, speaking in the carefully optimistic tones doctors reserve for terminal patients. When he left, Jessica and I were alone again in the quiet hospital room. Dr. Michaels says you can come home tomorrow, she told me, if you're stable, and I'll be staying with you. What about your job in Boston? I've taken a leave of absence, she said. They understand. And honestly, I need some distance from the city right now, from the apartment I shared with Andrew, from that life. I studied her face, seeing the pain beneath the determination. Jessica, whatever happens with Andrew, whether you reconcile or divorce or something in between, I want you to know that I support your decision. It's your life, your choice. Like you always wanted it to be, she said softly. I understand that now. All the conditions in the will, all the pushing for education and independence. You weren't trying to control me. You were trying to ensure I could always control my own life. I nodded, emotion making speech difficult. Exactly. She took my hand again, her fingers warm against my cool skin. The will, the new one you made with Thomas. He told me you removed all the conditions. You don't need them anymore, I said simply. You never did, perhaps. You're strong, capable, independent, everything your father and I hoped you would be. With one change, she said, a smile touching her lips. I'm not estranged from my mother anymore. Outside the hospital window, life in Millfield continued. People walking down Main Street, cars passing, clouds drifting across the autumn sky. Soon, I would be gone from this scene, my part in the town's story complete. But Jessica would remain, carrying forward not just my name and my property, but my values, my determination, my love for this community. In the face of death, that felt like the greatest victory of all. The first snow of winter arrived early, dusting Millfield with white on a November morning. From my bedroom window, I could see Mrs. Peabody's oak tree, now bare of leaves but crowned with crystalline white, and beyond it, the spire of the town church, the roof of the library, the gentle rise of hills in the distance. The view was familiar, comforting, a landscape I had known all my life. 3 months had passed since the confrontation at Town Hall. 3 months of changes, of healing, of preparation, both for the town's future and for my absence from it. My condition had deteriorated more rapidly than expected. The cancer had spread to my liver, bringing new pain, new limitations. I was confined to bed most days now, dependent on Jessica and Rita and the hospice nurse who came 3 times a week. The strong woman who had run a diner solo for decades now needed help to walk to the bathroom, to eat, to change clothes. Yet despite the physical decline, these months had brought a peace I hadn't known in years. Jessica had moved back to Millfield permanently, taking a position with a small architectural firm in the next county, but primarily focusing on the downtown preservation project. She had filed for divorce from Andrew, a process he didn't contest, perhaps as his own form of apology. The diner remained open, now managed by Rita with occasional supervision from Jessica. They had begun the first phase of renovation, restoring the original 1950s facade, expanding the kitchen, adding a community meeting room in the back. The building that had sustained me for so many years was being prepared for its next chapter. James Reynolds and Crestview Development had retreated from Millfield in disgrace. The investigation into their practices had expanded to include projects in 3 other states, resulting in hefty fines and the resignation of several executives. Marcus Delaney had turned state's evidence, revealing a pattern of fraudulent tactics stretching back years. The local paper, the same one that had once featured my diner's homemade pies, now regularly ran updates on the legal proceedings. From my bed, I watched it all unfold with a sense of satisfaction that surprised me. The old Eleanor would have taken no joy in another's downfall, would have focused only on her own affairs. But the new Eleanor, the awakened Eleanor, understood that sometimes justice required drawing firm lines, taking public stands, refusing to disappear quietly. A soft knock at the door drew my attention from the window. Jessica entered, carrying a tray with tea and toast. All I could manage these days. "How are you feeling this morning?" she asked, setting the tray on the bedside table. "Well enough," I replied, the lie automatic, protective even now. But her raised eyebrow called me on it, and I amended, "The pain is worse, but I'm okay." She helped me sit up, plumping pillows behind my back, with a tenderness that still surprised me. After so many years of distance, of misunderstanding, the ease of our connection now seemed miraculous. "Thomas Blackwell called," she said, pouring tea into my favorite chipped mug. "The paperwork for the Preservation Trust is finalized. The diner and the house are officially transferred. He'll bring the documents by this afternoon for your signature." I nodded, relieved. It had been my last concern, ensuring that everything was legally settled before my death. The diner, the house, my modest savings, all now part of the Eleanor and Frank Walsh Historic Preservation Trust, with Jessica as its executive director. The structure protected the properties from future development schemes, while providing Jessica with a modest income and a clear purpose. "Rita wants to know if you feel up to visitors today," Jessica continued, breaking a piece of toast into smaller, more manageable pieces for me. "Tom from the diner and Sarah from the flower shop were asking about you." I considered how I felt. The pain level, the fatigue, the increasing difficulty in focusing my thoughts. "Maybe tomorrow," I said. "Just family today." Family. The word encompassed so few people now. Just Jessica and Robert, really. My sister Margie had visited briefly after hearing of my illness, but our connection was too tenuous for a longer stay. The bonds of shared history weren't always enough to bridge decades of separate lives. Jessica sat on the edge of the bed, helping me with the tea when my hands shook too much to manage it myself. She had lost weight these past months, worry and stress taking their toll. But there was a new confidence in her bearing, a sense of purpose that reminded me of myself at her age. "I found something yesterday," she said, reaching into her pocket. "When I was going through Dad's old tools in the garage, I thought you might want to see it." She placed a small object in my palm. A ring. My wedding ring. The one I had sold to pay for her birthday party dress when she was 11. The small diamond caught the morning light, winking like a star. "How?" I breathed, unable to complete the question. "There was a note with it," Jessica explained. "From Dad. He must have tracked it down, bought it back before the accident." She swallowed hard. "The note said he wanted to surprise you on your anniversary, that he knew how much it hurt you to sell it, even though you never said so." Tears filled my eyes. Tears for Frank, for the love we had shared, for the sacrifice I had made so willingly, and the recognition of that sacrifice he had carried to his grave. "He always knew me so well," I whispered, "better than I knew myself sometimes." Jessica nodded, her own eyes glistening. "He said that in the note too, that you would give away everything you had for the people you loved, without ever letting them know the cost, that it was his job to see the cost, to honor it, to try to give back what you gave so freely." I closed my fingers around the ring, feeling its familiar weight after all these years. "Your father was a remarkable man. So was his wife," Jessica said softly. I wish I had understood that sooner. I reached for her hand. "You understand now. That's what matters." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the snow fall outside the window, each lost in our own thoughts. Finally, Jessica spoke again. "I've been thinking about what happens next. After..." She couldn't say the words, but I nodded, understanding. "The diner will continue," she said. "Rita wants to introduce a special menu item, the Eleanor Walsh breakfast, eggs, bacon, and your famous cinnamon toast." I smiled at the thought. She'd better get the cinnamon mixture right. Equal parts sugar and cinnamon, with just a hint of nutmeg. "I've got the recipe," Jessica assured me. "I've been learning all your secrets. Rita's been teaching me to make the pie crust too, though I'm nowhere near as good as you yet." The idea of Jessica in the diner kitchen, learning the recipes I had perfected over decades, brought a warmth to my chest that had nothing to do with tea or medication. Some part of me would live on there, in the dishes served, in the atmosphere maintained, in the community sustained. "And the house?" I asked. "I'm staying," she said simply. "This is home. It always was. I just didn't appreciate it." She looked around the bedroom with its faded wallpaper, its worn furniture, its carefully preserved memories. "I might update a few things eventually. The kitchen counters are pretty worn, but the bones of this place, they're good, strong, like the people who built it, like Frank, with his carpenter's hands, like me, with my practical determination, like Jessica herself, with her architect's vision and newfound sense of heritage. I'd like that," I said. "Homes should evolve with the people who live in them." Jessica's phone buzzed with a text message. She checked it quickly. "Thomas is on his way with the paperwork, and Uncle Robert just arrived downstairs. Do you want me to help you dress?" I considered the effort it would require, the energy it would consume. "No," I decided. "They can see me as I am. No more pretending." She nodded, understanding as she so often did now. "I'll send Uncle Robert up. Call if you need anything." After she left, I looked again at the wedding ring in my palm. So many secrets kept, so many sacrifices made in silence. The ring symbolized all of it. Love and loss, giving and receiving, the cycles of a life fully lived. With effort, I slipped it onto my finger. It was loose now, my hands thinned by illness, but it stayed in place. A perfect circle, complete after so many years. Robert's heavy tread on the stairs announced his arrival. He entered with a bouquet of winter flowers, whites and greens, elegant in their simplicity. "From Sarah's shop," he explained, setting them on the dresser. "She said to tell you the whole town is thinking of you." I smiled at the thought of Millfield's residents, my customers for decades, holding me in their thoughts. The town has been good to me, even when they thought I was just practical Eleanor. "You were never just anything," Robert said, settling into the chair beside my bed. "Frank knew that. Jessica knows it now. And you?" I asked, curious about how this quiet man who had been part of my life for so long saw me. "I always knew," he said simply. "Why do you think I kept coming back year after year? Even when it was hard, even when I felt I was intruding." I reached for his hand, this steady, reliable man who had been my connection to Frank, my ally in raising Jessica, and now, one of my few remaining links to the world I would soon leave. "You were never intruding," I told him. "You were family. You are family." The snow continued to fall outside, transforming the familiar landscape into something new, something pristine. Inside, surrounded by the house that had sheltered my life's journey, I felt a similar transformation. Not an erasure of what had been, but a gentle covering, a soft reconciliation with the past. Jessica returned with Thomas Blackwell, legal documents in hand. As they explained the final arrangements, as I signed my name with a trembling hand but a clear mind, I thought about legacy, not the buildings or the bank accounts, but the values, the connections, the love that endured beyond material things. My daughter sat beside me, her hand resting lightly on mine, steadying the pen when necessary. In her face, I could see echoes of myself, of Frank, of generations before us. The will said her name first, had always had her name first, not because of money or control, but because of love. The fiercest, most enduring love a mother can have for her child. Some people might look at my life and see smallness. A woman who never left her hometown, who ran a modest diner, who pinched pennies, and lived without luxury. But I knew differently. I had lived richly, loved deeply, fought fiercely for what mattered most. I had built something lasting in Jessica, in the diner, in the community I had served. The money had never been the point. It had only ever been the means to what truly mattered: security, opportunity, independence. the freedom to choose one's own path, to stand on solid ground, to help others do the same. That was the true inheritance I was leaving, not just to Jessica, but to Millfield itself. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the town in pristine white. Tomorrow, it would be trampled into pathways, cleared from driveways, transformed by the community's movement through it. But for now, in this quiet moment between what had been and what would come, it was perfect. A clean page, ready for new stories to be written. Stories that would include the memory of a woman who had once been called Practical Eleanor, but who had proven to be so much more. A woman who had lived, loved, and left her mark, not in grand gestures or material wealth, but in the subtle, enduring ways that truly shape a life, a family, a community. My daughter said I only cared about money. The will said her name first. Both were true, but neither held the whole truth. The whole truth was simpler and infinitely more complex. I had cared about her, about Frank, about this town, about building something that would last. The money was just the tool. The love was always the purpose,